Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Sally Newall on the show. Good morning to you and welcome, Sally.
Good morning.
You are the founder and owner of Simply Ice Cream, and prior to that, and I think you still do, you've run a catering business for over 20 years, and that was a bit of a springboard into you getting into the ice cream business. In fact, it was feedback from customers from your homemade ice cream that led you to set up a business and focus on Simply Ice Cream and the successful premium brand where you are today. And today we're going to be exploring how you navigated the pandemic and probably continue to navigate that, your leadership during that time, and keeping your team motivated and inspired. But before we go into that conversation, I'm just really curious of what you love about what you do, Sally.
Well, I think, food has always been a massive part of my life. My mother ran a catering business for years, and I then joined her. I trained as a chef and lived in Australia for 6 years as a chef. So I think, sort of that aspect of it is what I love. And just, I suppose, sort of with the ice cream, what I've discovered is that the trade shows, the consumer shows, actually meeting the public and getting feedback is, it's a great feeling when someone comes up and says they love Simply Ice Cream. So, yeah.
Yes, I mean, you're selling something particularly nice, though, aren't you? I mean, it's
Yeah.
people love
Yeah,
ice cream, and obviously, it's in the UK right now. It's the sun is shining, and it's set to get even
finally.
hotter.
Yeah.
Finally, and so I'm sure you're going to be busy selling lots of ice cream. We hope.
Yes. Yeah, we hope so. And the last sort of week, 10 days has been much busier. Because this year actually we haven't had a summer to date, really. So it's quite nice to see the sun.
Yes, but you don't want it too hot, because if it goes too hot, people don't buy ice cream, do they?
No, they don't. They stop eating. Yeah.
It's a funny old thing. We're funny old things. I remember I used to sell soup in the winter.
Okay.
Obviously, it gets cold, and then people buy a load of soup. So it's
Yeah.
interesting what the
We
temperature
did
can
think
do.
about doing that as a winter alternative at one point.
Right.
But actually with the theatres and things, we actually keep going all year round now.
Yes. No, fantastic. So obviously, it's probably been talked to death in some ways, the pandemic, because it has. But I'd like us to go back when it all happened for you, just over 2.5 years now, and what happened in your thinking? How did you manage, and what were the first things that you did to try and navigate this completely unknown that was thrust upon us? I'd just be intrigued
Yeah.
to and sort of that reflection of that, really.
Okay. Well, I mean, we'd actually been over to Dubai that the week before everything shut down to see a manufacturer that we're hoping to work with over there. Got back on the 16th, and obviously that week it all kicked off. And very quickly we realised that we were going to lose probably, at least half our customers, if not more. As it panned out, 70% of our customer base shut. So I'd actually sat down with all the staff on the Thursday, and we'd had a discussion. We'd worked out what we'd turned over that week, and I'd worked out what we could afford to pay in staffing costs. And they had all agreed really kindly to do 10 hours a week going forward, and we would just sort of run with it and see what happened. So I sent them all home that Thursday, having agreed to come back in on the Monday. And obviously the furlough scheme was announced on the Sunday. So when they came into work on the Monday, I just said to them, look, guys, you're far better off on the furlough scheme than 10 hours a week. So please go home, and I'll just keep in touch and see you, as this progresses. Luckily, I have 4 children who aren't really children anymore. They're young adults, all at university or working. And they all came home through the pandemic, and they've always worked with me. They've all got their level 2 catering certificates. So we literally just made what we needed to make throughout the pandemic as a family. So it actually worked. It worked for everybody, because it meant that I could keep the business running. People were on furlough. They then came back part work, part furlough. When we could do that, and obviously it was up and down the whole time. So I mean, they came back for 2-3 months and then had to go off again permanently, and so it was an interesting time. But we did keep the whole thing running throughout, albeit with only 30% of our customer base. So
So did you lose 70% of your business then overnight? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think we've always thought we were quite clever in our spread across sort of retail, hospitality, sort of seasonal venues and things. But when something like this happens, you realize that, actually no one was untouched by this. I think, our retailers were the only ones that remained open. But everything from sort of cafes to parlours to entertainment to cinemas to theatres, everything just closed. So it was an interesting time.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of probably personal emotion, and obviously a lot of emotion in your team that work with you. How
Yeah.
did you manage that? How did you sort of deal with that from your own perspective, but also other people's?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a WhatsApp group where we sort of kept in contact, and every month I contacted them just to see how they were doing one-on-one. I think we're quite a small team, and a lot of them have worked for me for a number of years. Mainly mums, because we've always sort of worked around school hours, and mainly very local to us. So, sort of, albeit we couldn't see each other, so we did keep in contact via that. I think, the pandemic definitely changed mentality. I think, some of them, having been on furlough, didn't then want to come back permanently. And so what we've now had to do is actually we reassessed very quickly, and we're actually doing 2 shift patterns. So we have 2 production managers now, and some of them are doing 16 hours a week. So we can sort of jiggle it, but it has been quite interesting because it has changed the way that people think and the way that people work, I think, permanently. I don't think anyone's going to go back to where we were before. So it's been interesting.
I'm sure it has. And at that point when you were putting people on furlough and your kids came back from university to help you, you lost 70% of your sales. Did you look out into the future and think this is really bad? Or did you think, okay, how can I reassess? How can I build this back? How can I do things differently? What went on to try and also to get you away from that survival mindset, possibly at the start, into a thriving? What did you do? What were the sort of approaches you did to do to help yourself?
Well, I think initially it was very surreal. The whole thing was very surreal. It was actually quite nice though, because I suppose, when I think about, sort of, I've always run at least 2 or 3 businesses at a time. So I've always sort of been going at 110 miles an hour. So actually to have that time, especially those first 3 months where, we couldn't even go anywhere. So, so everything was quiet and everything was shut down. So we sort of did 2 days in the ice cream, and I actually, for the first time in years and years, I was able to sit in the garden and just sort of think about where we took things next. And I think over the last sort of 5-10 years, there have been a number of things that I've wanted to sort of implement within the business that just didn't have time to do. So what the pandemic did allow me to do was we set up a franchise distribution. We now have a Suffolk franchisee who distributes to outlets and does trade shows and consumer shows within Suffolk. And that model we're hoping to replicate across the country. So that was the first thing. We also launched the vegan range within lockdown, which we've been planning but just hadn't had time to do. And we also prepped and recently launched a dog ice cream. So there were sort of lots of things. The Middle East thing is something that I've been working on for a while, but I had time to actually put these things down on paper and actually start to implement them. So in a lot of ways, that was very positive from the pandemic, albeit, the whole thing was pretty devastating across the board for a lot of people. I think, for me, I had that time to actually work on the business again, which I think, for most people within a business environment, your day-to-day running takes over your life. So in a way, it was quite nice. Not that I'd wish it again, but, it was quite nice to have that time.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people, and I deal with a lot of businesses, had that moment where they were forced to not think, but forced to sort of stop. And that created that thinking opportunity and that time to reflect. And a lot of business owners started to think like yourself differently about things, or had finally a chance to go to reassess their business. And which is interesting, actually, that's obviously a positive that came out of it. How did you then, because there's still, and in some ways still probably is now, because we're in challenging economic sort of challenges right now versus what we had before. How did you deal with the uncertainty with your team? How did you keep them, I suppose, inspired in a context? Some of them were furloughed, coming back, a bit of remotes, not always there, sales dripping in, coming, all sorts of stuff going on. How did you keep your team motivated and inspired?
I think, for a lot of them, they really, so I mean, that I've known them personally quite a long time. They're very loyal, they're amazing as staff. And I think, a lot of them were really ready to come back. I think, sort of for many of them, it was just, we need to get back to work. We need to do something different. I think, there were a couple of staff, one, when the first furlough scheme finished, she left quite quickly afterwards. But I think, her rationale was, I've survived the last year with very little, albeit there was nowhere to spend it, and she reassessed her life and just didn't want to work anymore. And then I had one other at the end of the September who she decided that, she was going to sort of do something different. And I think that thought process was there for a lot of them. But, sort of, I think, so the ones that are still here have been very loyal for years. And I think they like the flexibility of the business. I've always tried to be quite flexible with the hours they do. Just because a lot of them are mums, and we need that flexibility in our lives. If a child's sick, you want to be there. So, sort of, I think that has sort of instilled a certain loyalty, which is invaluable, really.
And just on reflection, did you sort of change your style of leadership in the last 2 years, or did it stay the same, or did certain things come out that you didn't realize you had in you?
I don't think so. I think sort of, I think as business owners, we've had to be more sort of empathetic to everything that's happening, because I think a lot of people have suffered massively with mental health over this whole issue. And certainly I know, amongst my children's friends and things, it's had a massive impact. So I think from that point of view, we've had to be more understanding of issues they might be having, problems they have at home. But I think generally, I suppose, the other thing that sadly I had to do, I had a general manager, which we just couldn't afford through the whole thing. And so I've actually, I have taken a step backwards in my business in terms of, I'm back probably 5-10 years where I'm doing everything again.
Right.
But that's also, in a very positive way, allowed me to see the business again in every aspect, and just to sort of, I suppose, hone it so that we're not in a place where there is potential for it all to sort of fall down. So, I think this whole thing, sort of as negative as it was, I think, you have to look for the positives in it. And I think it's probably allowed me to know my staff better again.
Yeah, I think that's and it's good to look for the silver linings in difficult times, because I think that's where we keeps us motivated, but also we gain some learnings from that. And the fact that I've noticed a lot of CEOs, business owners have got a lot more empathetic with their style of leadership. The fact that perhaps they were doing lots of calling people from home and seeing their kids in the background, see where they lived. There's a lot more, life became more, I suppose, personal, and home life and work life came all integrated into one in some sense.
Yeah.
And I think that empathy thing really did sort of dial up, which was, I think, a good thing positively going forward, in terms of making people a bit more aware of people's needs and what's happening within their business. Yeah. If you went back again, knowing what you know now and knowing your learnings and what you saw, would you do anything differently when it all happened? Something you think, actually, I would have done that differently, or I've learned this?
I think, the other thing we did in lockdown was set up an e-commerce platform. I think in retrospect, we would have done that a lot quicker.
Right.
I think, I think all of us were caught slightly unaware by the sort of need for, the sort of online selling. And I know a friend of mine who does fudge. I mean, her online sales went through the roof, but that kept her business going. And I think, sort of in retrospect, that's probably the only thing that I would try and get sorted sooner than we actually did, because, we now can ship anywhere in the UK through this fulfillment center. And I think, it is gaining traction now. But if we had done it from the start of the pandemic, or, sort of within 3 months, we would have probably sold a lot of ice cream online. So that's probably the only thing. But as far as everything else, I don't think anything else I would change. I think, it was such an odd time that we just had to run with it. And I think, I mean, business irrespective, I think, when Brexit happened, we were in the same sort of situation, this unknown precedent, wasn't sure what was going to happen next. And I think, you just have to go with it as it happens and do the best you can and try and navigate, really choppy waters. And that's what we've done through Brexit and now the pandemic, and obviously now the war in Ukraine and the sort of fuel crisis and food costs rising. It's, it doesn't seem to stop at the moment. It does feel like we're on a roller coaster. Yeah.
Yes. And how you deal with that? Because obviously it has been almost like it was the pandemic initially was almost like an acute thing, then it became chronic. And as you say, you've gone from Brexit, pandemic, Ukraine war, food prices, energy prices. And I'm not being doomsday here, but there's some pretty tough challenges out there right now.
Yeah.
How are you facing that? What do you do? How are you facing it mentally? It'd be interesting how you mentally sort of processing that and keeping yourself, because you seem quite sort of grounded and quite cheery and sort of quite smiling
There are
still.
times, yeah. No, I have to say that we've also had the site move, which that has been really challenging. I think you just have to let things roll over you to a certain extent, because if you think too hard about everything that's going on, I think we would all have a breakdown. I think there is so much going on in the world at the moment but we have no control over it. So I think we just have to run with what we know, do the best we can, and hope we come out the other side. I think the rising costs are extraordinary. I don't think we haven't seen anything like this for years and years. And for us personally, things like our dairy prices, I mean, it's almost doubled. I think, I'm hoping that over the next year to 18 months, things will calm down. I think in 2008, when we had the recession, what we did find was that I think hospitality suffered massively, and I feel really sorry for them, because they have been through a really tough couple of years, and I don't think it's going to get much better for them for at least another 2. Because I think when people really feel the pinch, they won't be going out, but they will be entertaining at home probably. And I think for us, that's where we actually saw traction in 2008, because people were buying a treat to have at home. So, I'm not overly concerned at the moment. That might come back to bite me in a year's time, but I think sort of we're constantly trying to evolve, and things like the dog ice cream launch has been really successful. We've actually only launched it within our own retailers at the moment. We haven't put it out to to sort of pet shop owners and that sort of thing, which we're going to do in the next month. So I think we can potentially generate some revenue from that, albeit there's probably quite a short season for that. But I think we just have to keep moving forward and sort of not reinventing the wheel, but certainly looking to add to what we do.
So how do you deal with a doubling of the price in dairy? I mean, that's significant, because you sell ice cream that's predominantly dairy. I mean, I don't know what percentage of it is. It's probably lots.
Well, it's 50% double cream, and our cream has gone up from $5.65 to $9.68.
So I mean, I guess you can't just double the price of the product. Is that?
No. So we had a very small increase.
So how do you work that through? Because obviously prices have been going up everywhere, but people have to do that because they've got to pay the cost of things, and you've got to be sustainable, because if you don't put things up, you'll go out of business because
Yeah.
you're not making any money. So
Yeah.
how are you managing that? That's interesting to understand.
Well, we're actually quite good with our management accounts, our monthly management accounts. We have meetings, we sort of talk it through. I think we had a small price increase in January. I think we are probably going to have another one fairly soon. I think, fuel costs, he fills the van up, it's £135. It's, it's crazy. And that's almost double. So I think, sort of, as I said earlier, I think, we just need to run with this for the moment, hoping that things will stabilize in the next few months, and we'll see a slight decrease. Having said that, when the vanilla crops failed, sort of, what was it, 6-7 years ago, vanilla overnight it was the most expensive thing you could buy. And it's never really come back down. It probably came down about 20%, but it's never really come back to what it was pre that disaster where all the crops failed. So I think, it'll be interesting to see, sort of just how quickly things start to come down. Because I think once they're up there, it's very hard for people if they are making that sort of profit in the retail industry to then lose it again. But I think, hopefully, there will be people who come along and say, no, we're not prepared to pay these prices. I'm hoping as well that, actually through the pandemic, what was really interesting with the retailers, especially our farm shops and independents, so those first 3 months when the supermarkets weren't organised, didn't have stuff on the shelves, everyone went to the farm shops and independents and found them. A lot of people didn't even know they existed. And because it was such a sort of 12 to 16 week period, we really hoped that would become a habit. I think it has helped a little bit, but not to the extent we'd hoped. And I do think our reliance on overseas products, had got, sort of, we'd just gone overboard with that. There are so many amazing producers within the UK that we just need to start buying British again. So I think there's a lot of that as well.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people started to go more local, haven't they? That's what pandemic made it, everything sort of more a local environment and started to support their local communities, which I think was, whether it will continue or has continued, I don't know, but it would be good and healthy. I think more sustainable in that way for small shops to be done that way. When you look back, and well, you just talked about lots of innovations, lots of things you've done in the last 2 years, which was as a result of you being forced to stop and think. What is that? Is that sort of taught you to do more of that? I'd just be intrigued. Do you put more time in to think?
I think, to be honest, as we've sort of come back out of the pandemic and back into normal day-to-day life, no, I think we're probably just going to get caught up in that hamster wheel again, and that thought process and that ability to have the time to innovate is probably going to go by the wayside to a large extent. I think hopefully as we come out of it and things sort of come back to some kind of normal, we will be able to grow, and then I can get a new general manager and hopefully have that time again to sort of work on new business and innovation again. But I think at the moment I think we're probably going to sort of tread water for a couple of years and just keep it steady and just hopefully get through this next bit of choppy water. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. But yes, obviously you did, responded really well in the pandemic. It sounded like that, you looked after your staff and, innovated, created an e-commerce site, launched a vegan range, launched a dog range, and what else? Have I missed stuff?
The franchise.
Franchise. I mean, they're huge things. I mean, massive and different.
And move site. I think the site move was just, that's been horrendous.
So that's incredible. But I suppose it's a thought that actually, sometimes taking some time out can really create that space, isn't it? But as you say, you're all hands to the pump at the moment because of what you're doing. And so just generally, what's your view on the future in terms of how do you view the future with your business?
Well, I think, the site move, is probably from a sort of personal point of view. We've operated from a home setting for the last sort of 12 years. And to actually have a site that we actually can distance ourselves from our home life is quite nice. We've never had that before. The home site looks like a commercial site now. So we're in the process of turning all our outbuildings and things into Airbnbs. So the catering will go at some point, and the Airbnbs will be what we do from there. But I think, sort of just to have that divide is actually, it's quite nice. We've never had that before.
Brilliant stuff. Well, thank you for coming on, Sally. If people are interested in connecting with you, but also want to get your delicious ice cream, how might they do that?
Well, we supply across the southeast into farm shops and delis, Waitrose, Co-op, and Morrison's. But if they are further than the southeast, so that's sort of Essex, Suffolk, because obviously we have the franchise there, London, Surrey, Sussex, and Kent, we can do it online. So they can go onto the website and order 6 pots online for anywhere in the UK.
Okay, and what's your website address?
It's www.simplyicecream.co.uk.
Brilliant. Well, it's been great talking to you today and hearing about your inspiration of what you've done for the last 2 years and how you've navigated the challenges and continue to navigate that, which I'm sure you will continue to be successful. So I do appreciate your time today, Sally.
Thank you. Thank you.